From Gods to Altars, a look at ritual worship in ancient Canaan. The Canaanites are the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, which was located in the southern Levant during the Bronze Age, what we know today as Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and parts of Syria. There were no distinct borders for the land of Canaan, and the term Canaanites is somewhat of an umbrella term, with there being no established consensus on whether it is about just an ethnic, cultural, or social group. The Canaanites were polytheistic, worshipping a large pantheon of deities. It was led by El, the creator deity, and rivaled by Baal, the storm god. Resources suggest that which god being worshipped varied per settlement and city. Worship for the Canaanites involved many rituals, including things like animal sacrifice, offerings, and festivals, amongst other things. Most of our current understanding of the ancient Canaanite and Syro-Canaanite religious practices stems from biblical accounts and the findings at archaeological sites like Ugarit and Emar, both ancient cities and cultural hubs of the Middle and Late Bronze Age. The Ugaritic texts and the tablets unearthed at Emar contain various Canaanite mythologies and recorded ritual practices. The function of rituals for this culture stems from a place of pleasing the gods, as it was Canaanite belief that with worship came favor, blessing good harvest, success in war, fertility, promoting personal relationships, royalty succession, etc. Rituals, offerings, and festivals had less to do with sanctification and more with keeping the gods happy. Blood rituals revolving around sacrifice were unquestionably present, along with non-blood rituals like liquid offerings, incense burning, offering a material good such as fabrics, metals, or food, processions, the movement of objects representing deities, enthronement rites, recitations and prayers, communal meals, purification rites, anointings, rituals of atonement, and more. Ritual worship happened in designated areas. Temples were an important staple in Canaanite religion, with each settlement having at least one and larger city-states having multiple. Open cult spaces were also present, consisting of a paved plaza with an altar for offerings and depressions to drain blood, and various thresholds, such as temple entrances, household entrances, and city gates, were focal points for a multitude of rituals representing a symbolic shift from old to new. An example of this use of thresholds is documented in the installation of Baal's high priestess at Emar, an ancient city located along the Euphrates River. The installation festival was a series of rituals which started at the temple gates by shaving the priestess's head, followed by various rites and offerings occurring inside the temple, and as the new priestess exited, her head was then anointed with oil. This example shows how various locations were utilized to express symbolic shifts and changes in individual status. The priestess shaves her head, representing a literal casting off of an old life at the beginning, and at the end she is then anointed with oil, again at the temple threshold. Having the ceremonial actions take place at an entrance illustrates the leaving of an old life and the entering of a new role. For the Canaanites, location mattered. Sacrifice was akin to the feeding of the gods, something that was considered a responsibility given by El, the creator god, to humankind. It was not an act of individual reverence, but rather a function of the entire social group. Costs and responsibility for the sacrifice were covered by kings who hoped to build a relationship with their patron god. The most common kind of sacrifice is often translated as a peace or communion offering with the following communal meal, and the second most common was the burnt offering. In essence, the peace or communion offering was like a fellowship dinner. A portion of the animal sacrificed would go towards the deity being worshipped, and the rest of the animal would be eaten by those worshipping. The goal is, as it sounds, to create peace and build favor between the participants and the patron god. A burnt offering is where the entirety of the animal is given to the deity, burned so the smoke could rise up to the god's place. This offering represented food for the god and thanksgiving. Different types of animals would be sacrificed for different types of ceremonies. There were 4 different systems to classify the animals: by class and sex, by class and species, and by class, species, and sex. The most common to be sacrificed were livestock like sheep and heifers, which were found to be sacrificed twice as much as bulls. Due to the infrequent use of the word holy in ancient Ugaritic texts, it's believed that the Canaanite religion wasn't as concerned with issues of purity and holiness, and, in stark contrast with their neighbors the Israelites, there was no concept of clean or unclean animals. Their religion was structured more through ritual practices than theological concerns. Animals were not the only thing being given to the deities. Agricultural items and material goods were also made as offerings. This includes grains, oils, honey, wine, vegetables, precious metals made into cult objects or offered as weights and ingots, and even fabrics and clothing. Offerings and any following feasts are thought to be utilized as a way for the elite in Canaanite society to flaunt their prestige and good fortune. Ritual texts do show us how this would have looked. There were procession rituals in which statues of deities were adorned in clothing and jewelry, while offerings and sacrifices were bestowed upon them before moving them to temples or the royal palace. Rights for royal succession, which was dependent on divine approval, could be asked for through sacrifices and the gesture of many offerings. These events might have been accompanied by festivals and celebrations with music and dancing. Sources like Egyptian relief sculptures in the Bible suggest that human sacrifice happened in Canaan in times of great military duress, where people were offered up to the god of the city in hopes of protection or favor. Also mentioned in inscriptions in biblical texts is the practice of harem, the slaughtering of war prisoners as an offering to the victorious god. Whereas the last two accounts happened only in times of war, there is reason to speculate that frequent sacrifice of children did take place. Evidence for this lies in both biblical accounts of this happening in Canaan and the archaeological findings of mass infant graves from regions populated by Canaanite descendants, like Carthage and Sicily. Some scholars believe the practice may have come with them from Canaan as they migrated. Tophet is the Hebrew word for a place of child sacrifice. Many Tophets were found in Carthage, the largest holding 20,000 infant remains, along with animals placed inside urns. This presence of animal bones in the urns with the infant remains is what suggests these sites as sacrificial. Again, Carthage is only relevant to the Canaanites as the Carthaginians were Phoenician settlers hailing from the land of Canaan who practiced Canaanite religion. Another practice which is met with disagreement in the scholarly sphere is sacred sexual rites. Some argue that female and male prostitutes were employed in temples to encourage the god's fertility of the land and of the womb, and archaeological findings do show cylinders decorated with depictions of the sacred marriage between the king priest and the queen priestess, their intercourse happening in the temple amid festivities of dancing and music. Canaan is placed at a crossroad between the dominant cultures of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Israelites. Throughout them all, there is a cultural exchange taking place, like deity overlaps between the pantheons, shared architectures for temples, art styles, ritual structures, and worship practices. The Canaanites were not something that had never been seen before, but rather a collection of cultural identities and influences. Ritual worship for the Canaanite people was deeply embedded into their culture and the cultures they were surrounded by, so much so that at the time they probably didn't consider it as a religion, but rather just the way things were. Though much of what we know today comes from fragments of long-buried accounts, what emerges is the picture of a culture that is deeply interwoven with symbolism and sacred tradition, which we can view as a reflection of the regional values and beliefs of that time. Here is my works cited for images, and thank you for watching.